Welcome to a brief intro of the Baroque era. The Baroque era was an exciting time in music and art. To us today, it may not seem like it, but people in the Baroque period were really pushing the boundaries of what was allowed in music and art. They were breaking the rules to try to make their music more expressive. The word Baroque was actually a jewelry term first. It was a French word describing a pearl with an irregular shape. You can see some Baroque pearls in the background of this video. So, how did the word Baroque come to describe music and art? It actually wasn't used for that purpose until after the Baroque period ended, because people in the next era, the classical era, looked back and they saw that ornate, extravagant, wildly dramatic music and art of the Baroque period, and they thought it was kind of irregular and weird, like a Baroque pearl. The Baroque era or Baroque period, they both mean the same thing, was from the year 1600 to the year 1750. Some famous composers of that day were Henry Purcell, George Friedrich Handel, who's best known for his Messiah, especially from that piece, the Hallelujah chorus, Hallelujah, and Johann Sebastian Bach, who was so influential that they actually mark the end of the Baroque period by his death in 1750. During the Baroque period, the modern orchestra was born. Orchestras were small when they first started, usually only about 9 to 14 instruments. And part of that is because those instrumentalists were also servants for the wealthy aristocrats or the churches who commissioned the music. So they would perform for rich, rich aristocrats or for churches who employed those instrumentalists. The Baroque orchestra had some specific instruments that were fairly typical. The violin looked much like the violins we know today. The viola, which is a little bit bigger than a violin, has a little bit lower sound. The cello, much bigger than a violin and a much lower sound. You have to sit down with a cello to play it. The string bass is the biggest of the string family. You have to stand up to play this one. Also the lowest sound. The flute. It looks much like our modern flutes, except it was made of wood, and it didn't have as many keys to help you cover up the holes, so you had to cover them all with your fingers. The oboe, again, made of wood, and not as many keys as our modern oboes to help you cover the holes, but otherwise pretty similar. The bassoon, this is a picture of a modern bassoon, but again, it probably would have had fewer keys to cover the holes than our modern bassoon does. The bassoon is like the cello or even the string bass of the woodwind section. Very long, very big instrument and very low sound. And then last but not least, the Baroque orchestra would have trumpets. They did not have valves like our modern trumpets, so you might think of buttons at the top of the trumpet to change the notes. Those weren't invented yet in the Baroque period, so a Baroque trumpet was just a curled up tube with a bell on the end. And that is a brief intro of the Baroque period.